Well, what do we have here? Another Halloween. And what I have for you tonight, some lovely stories. You must excuse me if my voice changes through the stories. You see, I have many different people inside. I wonder if you can hear the music, if it affects the stream, if there's any problems. I'm going to turn the music down now, but I will continue with the storytelling. So sit back, get your sweets, get your pumpkins, enjoy yourself. Have a great Halloween. But it's time for some stories. Ones that have never been seen. The first story we have tonight is called Visitors. And we all have visitors. Strange, weird, bizarre, friendly. Janice. Ugh. Horrifying. But these visitors are visitors that are unseen. It all starts with Chris. You see, Chris was a brave boy until it came to going to his nan's house. You see, there was a dark history at the house. Chris's friends would constantly tell him of the family before. How all 3 children went missing, and the parent was found mad. Of course, it's easy to see how with 3 children, one would go mad. I'm sure some of you out there may know what I mean. Chris tried to be brave when he would visit, but the floorboards creaked and would always make him look twice. He remembers his mother saying, "Don't worry if she says anything strange. She's getting a bit old now. She's losing the plot." Which seems fine when she's moaning about a dog that died 12 years ago. And her husband used to rant and rave, saying the dog's been dead for years. But he'd passed too now, so no one would stop her ramblings. Anyway, speaking of ramblings, that's what I've been doing. What really unsettled Chris was at 10 p.m. every night he was at his nan's. His nan's voice would become lower, would become croaky, and she'd start to whisper, "I wonder if we'll have any visitors tonight." Cold chills ran up Chris's spine. Why would we get visitors at night? He would think that, but he'd never say anything to Nan. After all, she's getting old now. But his heart started to beat as he thought about it more and more. One weekend, very like tonight, Chris was told he would be staying at his nan's for the whole weekend. He tried to fight and argue, but his parents said no. Chris arrived to a very familiar welcome. Cheap pop and nan kisses greeted him. We all love a bit of roller coaster after all. And then he sat down and his mum took his phone away. Imagine a weekend with no phone at this day and age. You might lose your mind. "Talk to your nan and have fun," she said, as she left, again. So Chris sat watching TV, and after a few hours, Chris realized it was a nice night. He was having a laugh, they was joking, and he'd forgetting what he'd been told about the house. He was listening to his nan rant on about the dog, and in a way it was comforting. It was normal. It was safe. He lost track of time, and the house got a sudden chill, like the one out tonight. "Nan, is the eating on?" Maybe he was from Wigan, I don't know. She was very still, staring blankly at the wall above the television. Not at the television, but above. Chris waved at her, but yet no response. His whole body shivering all over and over, trying to get to the heating control. It looks on, but it's so cold. It looks like we have visitors tonight, croaked his nan. Chris froze as he heard footsteps on the floor above. He turned to look at his nan. She was still facing the wall. Slowly, her head turned to face him. I think you should go to bed now. Chris was shaking. He had to do what his nan said, or he'd be in big trouble. You know what it's like to be in big trouble. He ran out the room and ran upstairs, switching on the lights, his heart racing. Chris noticed the hall was warm again, and could not see or hear anyone upstairs. It was fine. He was relaxed, he was calm. But usually he did hear footsteps or creaking floorboards. This was unusual. He thought, this old creaky house, the way Nan's being, she's just old. It's okay. He's trying to be brave, talking himself out of the fright in his heart. Chris reached his room. He grabbed the handle and he felt the cold take over his body again. He looked down and could see shadows under the door as if someone was inside his room. He closed his eyes. It's just my imagination. 3, 2, 1! He opened the door. But what he saw was nothing. Didn't he have the light on? Why was it pitch black? In the dark and cold it's hard to notice a thing, until he felt a warm hand on his back. From that day Chris said nothing more of what happened after that fright. But when the clock strikes 10, he always whispers, I wonder if we'll have visitors tonight. That was our first story, 10 minutes long. How good did we do? Now I'm going to check in with Facebook to see what you think of you. We have 4 viewers. Joe Man was not expecting this. What was you expecting? A house full of treats? No. This is Halloween. If there's any issues, please raise it now. I can see. And I can fix them, especially with my awful voice. Before we get on to story 2. Is everyone having a pleasant eve? Fine. I've had no complaints of yet, so I will move on to story number 2. This story is called Patch. Are you ready? Are you settled in? Have you got your sweets? I'm sorry it's taking so long to get to the next one. I'm just making sure everything's fine. But if we're fine, let's start again. Once many years ago, on a farmer's field close to Wigan, where I'm sure some of you are from, is where our next story takes place. A strange young boy called Stu wanted to fit in. Stu? Ha! But others would play tricks, scaring Stu. He thought if just this once he could scare the other children, he'd fit in. He'd have some friends. Don't we all want friends? I guess we do. He had his heart set on making this group. And he heard that they used to go to the fields and tell horror stories, ghost stories. They used to spook each other out, which sounds amazing. Sounds great. I wish we was doing that right now. Cold winter nights, just like tonight. Finally, I'll scare them there. That's what Stu said. He followed the group to the woods, and they went deeper and deeper, and the only light was from the moon above. I feel like we're being watched, blurted Jessica. I'm sorry, I can't do a girl's voice. I am a weird clown after all. Ah, yes. Ha! It'll be the farmer of the human harvest, joked Paul, the arrogant leader of the group. The farmer of the human harvest? It's something that one of the group said, and Stuart wondered. Human harvest? What does he mean? Oh, shut up! That's not real! Said Jessica. Paul laughed, leaning back on the fallen branch. You don't think so? Yeah? Who is he then? Jessica shouted. She wanted to know who he was, but she was still a bit scared. Paul got still, and Ryan had just lit the fire, the flames licking his face and filling the area with light. They all sat down around the fire, and Paul began to speak, taking a sip of his WKD. It's said that there was once a farmer who had a great life, family, friends, and always had the best farm ever. He'd always make the most money. Only one year, there was a huge frost. All year round, all the crops got ruined. Everyone he loved left him. His wife, his kids, his friends. He became bitter and angry. He hated everyone, especially people who would damage his field. Ryan whimpered. Wait, aren't we setting fire on those fields right now? What if he gets us? Paul continued. The winter came again and again. He wouldn't leave his home. He said it's that people started going missing. And somehow he got weirder. The locals noticed he was getting darker. His eyes got more sunk in. His tone, his manner, everything about him, his aura. But he'd always bring food to the market, even when there was no way he could grow anything. And let me tell you, there was a way he could grow something. I heard people started to go missing. They got locked away. And what I heard is he injected them with plant food over and over again so that they became vegetables themselves. And once that had happened, he'd eat the people and sell the rest at the market. Stuart's heart began to race fast. He took a big gulp of fear, and the group fell silent for a few seconds. Then all began to laugh. Ha ha! You can't make someone into a plant, Paul. Come on, laughed Ryan. I know, but I had you all going, didn't I? Paul said. Stuart thought this would be a perfect time to scare the group, pulling out his mask from his bag, though not suspecting it. But then suddenly, as he looked right, he ran into the camp. He's here! He's here! There was a huge bearded man in overalls, with sunken eyes and dirty clothes, and he was looking at me. He lifted his fingers and his lips. Shh. And he smiled. Jessica jumped out of her skin, scared by Stuart's sudden arrival. Paul stood in front of her, pushing Stuart to the ground. What are you doing, you idiot? It's just a story. The group left Stuart on the floor. He was crying. He was scared. After 10 minutes or so, the group left. Rachel, the quiet one of the group, spoke out. I think we scared him a bit too much. He did push him quite hard. You could have hurt him. Paul replied. So what? He was being a creep. But Ryan also spoke out. Yeah, but he could be hurt. He was crying. He looked really scared. Come on, let's just check. They arrived back at camp, the fire still burning, but no sign of Stuart. How bizarre. His Halloween mask was still there, his bag, his shoes. What's that? Said Jessica. Looking up, they saw something new that had appeared. It looked like a carving. A jack-o'-lantern, if you will. But it had no candle inside. And instead of looking scary, it looked scared. Watch when you play pranks, especially alone in the woods. You never know who's lurking there, or who you've led. But the question really is, was Stuart's scare really that good? Or was the jack-o'-lantern really Stuart's head? I'll let you decide. Hello all, welcome to this spook. We have one more story for the Halloween. And then I'll be off. I want you all to post comments, things you've been doing over Halloween, little things you've been enjoying yourself. It's the time of spirits after all. So we have one more story. Are you all ready? Are you all pumped? Okay. This story was inspired by today's post. Inspired almost by true events, but not quite. This story is one called "Do you want some sweets?" Clowns. What is it that makes them so creepy? Is it because we can't see who or what they may be? It is very rare for you to see a clown without a circus, without candy floss, without the rides, without everything you've always wanted, everything you've always dreamed of. It's very rare. So, what we really fear, is it really the person under the mist? Or is it a monster that we can't see because of the makeup? It was Halloween, and everyone was able to trick or treat. Kids and parents running around in masks and costumes. It was a time of fear of spirits, but it turned into a season for joy of sweets. James was dressed as a vampire with a cape and teeth. His friend Daniel was a devil, with also a cape, with plastic horns, and a pitchfork. They agreed that whoever got the most sweets this year would win all the sweets, and the loser had to give his away. Imagine, giving all your sweets away. What are you? A loser. Daniel went ahead to the other end of the street. However, James, he decided he would start at the closest side to make sure he got as many doors as possible. 1 hour later, James finally began at the final house. He had done the whole street, and there, he'd not seen Daniel since the game begun, but he knew Daniel was always playing his tricks, hiding from James. It was just another game, but not to James. He wanted to win. He wanted some sweets. On the corner of the street stood a very average house. In fact, the only thing that stood out about this house was that it didn't stand out at all. It was the only house in the street without any decorations. But that didn't put brave little James off. After all, this was the house Daniel had started on. Oh no, he had a full bucket of sweets and wanted more and more. He knocked twice, and the door suddenly creaked open. A pale man answered. You shouldn't be here. You should go, warned the man with darkened eyes. But brave little James took no notice. Trick or treat, and laughed at the old man as if it was part of the gag. Where are your parents, young boy? Shivered the old man. I'm 9 now. I don't need parents to walk with me around the street. I'm big and brave. I see. And your basket is already full. Don't you want to share the sweets with others? No, shouted James. I'm going to win all the sweets. The old man stood there and said coldly, Greedy boys don't always have the happiest endings. Okay, can I have my sweets now? I suppose. But first, come inside and see a trick. James wandered through the dusty old house filled with cobwebs. It was dark and lit by candlelight. However, at the end of the corridor, James could hear a cheery music and see bright lights. He ran through to see a whole amusement park out in the back garden. It was huge and filled with rides. This must be where Daniel got to. As James sprinted to the rides, he heard the old man speak. You have to see my trick, little boy, before you get your treat. James, of course, agreed. Even though the man was smiling at him in a weird way, he followed him close by. They wandered through another room, the colours changing in the room, from blue to green to red. It was very hard to see. I can make you a balloon animal, if you like. The old man's voice began to change. He pointed to the corner of the room. There stood a balloon animal in the shape of a dog. Wow, it's gigantic, James said. Though as he ran over, something started to feel wrong. He realized the balloon animal was dressed in a devil's outfit all along. And next to the leg was the same bucket as Dan's. That's so strange. He looked back at the old man's face, which started to change. His clothing became colourful, and his mouth turned into a big red grin. I told you I had a trick up my sleeve, little boy. Now let the trick begin. He was now a full clown, from his face down to his shoes of his feet. James started to cry as the clown's laugh got louder. What's up, little boy? Don't you want some sweets? Legend has it on a full moon on Halloween a monster will rise. His skin is cold and white as the moon, with big hungry eyes. And if you are found wandering around, trying to trick or treat, the last words you will ever hear is, do you want some sweets? That's all I have time for tonight, or all I've wrote. But thanks for chipping in, and I hope you have a lovely Halloween.